Hello, and howdy. Welcome to She's Fixin' to Write This Here Murder, y'all. I'm speaking to you from the post-apocalyptic wasteland of Central Texas, and I'm transmitting this podcast from an alternate dimension, and so on and so forth. I'm in a bit of a hurry today, so if you need more context, check out last week's introductory episode, where I vaguely allude to the situation here and explain the podcast's raison d'etre and such and so on. In this week's episode, I'm going to be blathering on about the pilot for the TV show Murder, She Wrote. This isn't a great time to do that because the pilot's real fucking long and I need to get this over with as soon as possible. Why, you may be asking? Because it's cicada season. The ecological shitting of the bed that produced these monstrosities is one link in a complex chain of events which culminated in total societal collapse. There's been no official scientific inquiry, what with most of the relevant smart people being dead, but rumor has it that some combination of unregulated industrial waste, irrigation runoff, growth hormones, GMOs, diet soda, and or vaping byproducts coalesced into some sort of Ninja Turtle-esque ooze. What I do know for certain is that the cicadas are as large as chihuahuas, omnivorous, and on their way to Austin as I speak. The rumor that the chemicals altered their sexuality seems wholly irrelevant by comparison. The only positive thing about cicada season is that they leave behind robust, chitinous exoskeletons, which can be turned into creepy armor or creepy hats or creepy fashion accessories. And looking creepy is a viable defense mechanism in the wasteland. The negatives include being eaten, having all your food eaten, and having all your friends, family, and or neighbors eaten. And that's a severe blow to morale, which is crucial in times like these. The worst part is that you're stuck indoors the whole time. As soon as you step outside, they swarm you. It's like being hit with a salvo of noisy bowling balls. Then you got a couple dozen on top of you, pinning you down and nibbling and staring at you with those blank, soulless eyes. Red eyes like a very weird doll's eyes. Anyway, it's not the sort of death I'm looking for, but it might just be the death I've secured for myself because I goofed up and lost track of time. To be fair, it's hard to keep track of time when you don't have a clock or a job or a regular sleep schedule. I have to sleep whenever and wherever I can be sure I won't be molested, as in bothered. But the bugs have a regimented schedule, a circadian rhythm, so to speak. The main point is that they're inactive at night, which means I need to finish this episode and get home before they arrive. Otherwise, I'm stuck here until nightfall. Here being Cooter's place. Cooter's a guy living in a tornado shelter with a generator and some car batteries, and he lets me trade for access to his sacred, soul-nourishing electricity. Considering diesel's pretty hard to come by these days, Cooter gives me access for cheap, considerably less than those jackasses down at the university. The downside is, Cooter's abode is about a 2-hour hike from my house. Don't worry about it. Presently, Cooter's sitting outside with the generator and an alarm clock waiting to cut the power as soon as my time runs out. Speaking of time, I'm in a hurry. To summarize, I really don't want to walk back in the dark with every available surface occupied by giant cicadas, silently watching me. I also don't really want to stay here until night because, well, he said I could stay if I gave him a kiss, which I'm reluctant to do. I've been around long enough to know that just a kiss turns into just a handjob in the blink of an eye. And the problem with that is I'm demisexual, so my heart just wouldn't be in it, and that's not fair to Cooter. In fact, I think Cooter might be undercharging because he's lonely, and he'd have to be real lonely to want to get intimate with someone looking like I do. I don't want to take advantage of his feelings, but I need the electricity. Anyway, I gotta get through this or I'll end up breaking an innocent man's heart and have to sit for hours in this bunker. There's nothing down here but a cot, a bucket, and my recording equipment. So we'd have nothing to do but talk or fool around or wrestle. Well, I can't abide that, I'm sorry, but there will be no introduction this episode. I realize that this is the first actual episode of my podcast and people have a right to expect me to make some sort of effort, but I got shit to do. It's a matter of life and death and big, huge, flesh-eating bugs and one man's tortured soul. Murder, She Wrote pilot episode discussion begin now.
For God's sake! If this is some kind of a sick joke...
Too long. We've got to pep it up, people. All right, second act in 10 minutes. We open tomorrow night. I don't intend to close the night after. Ladies, this is a private rehearsal, no outsiders.
Mr. Cellini, you did ask us to meet you here.
Why would I do a thing like that? I don't even know you.
We're the refreshment committee.
From the PTA.
Oh, yes, the cookie ladies. Please, see me after the rehearsal.
Mr. Cellini, I just love the show. It's so mystifying.
Gave me the goosebumps. Oh, yes, and I'm sure no one will ever guess the uncle is the killer.
Wait a minute.
What's that?
Hold it, lady! No. Hold it! Whatever made you think the uncle is the killer?
Well, isn't he? How delightful. I was totally fooled.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, he is the killer.
Mrs. Fletcher. Oh, and this is Mrs. Hoey in charge of punch, and this is Mrs. Thompson. She's brownies and macaroons.
Macaroons.
Charmed. Look, somebody slipped you a copy of the script, right?
Oh, no. No, but when the uncle showed up after the party wearing a different tie, obviously he changed it for a reason. And then there was the phone call from the coroner. I mean, he couldn't have known about that. Not unless he'd overheard the conversation between the doctor and the priest. Oh, silly of me. Here I am explaining your play to you. I'm so sorry. Come on, girls. We'll catch the second act tomorrow with everyone else.
Jessica, could you tell us about...
The episode opens with the rehearsal of a play, a murder mystery attended by refreshment committee member and main character Jessica Fletcher, portrayed by my new surrogate grandma, Angela Lansbury. Jessica immediately establishes her uncanny mystery-solving abilities, which is important because this is a show about her solving mysteries. Although a detective show where the detective doesn't detect anything in 12 whole seasons might be worthwhile. Regardless, Jessica is one smart cookie. Lady. After only seeing the first part of the play, Jessica's able to determine the identity of the killer, much to the chagrin of the director. He follows him out and confronts Jessica, and then realizing he's made a fatal mistake sort of withers under her gaze. Jessica is relatively big, probably around 8 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a thick neck, extremely vascular, with blonde hair coiffed short in classic old lady style. I don't know if Angela's that big in real life or what, but she towers over the director and her fellow refreshment committee members. Speaking of the other members, Miss Thompson has a big scar across her face and an eye patch, and Miss Howie has on those old person sunglasses that fit over your regular glasses, but the word fuck is painted across the lenses. I'm not entirely sure what's being communicated here. We also catch a glimpse of Jessica's hands and see that her knuckles are bloody, as if she had been fistfighting recently. Again, I'm not sure if this was a specific choice by the director or just how Angela lived her life at the time. This episode aired in September of 1984, which means that Angela would have been approximately 58 years old. Considering this pilot is meant to court funding for a full season, they may have been attempting to broaden their demographic appeal. Another thing I'm not sure about. They said that they were with the PTA, which suggests that this is a school, but all the actors and stagehands are in their 40s. So, what? As an aside, there is a poster showing that the play is called Something Terrible, which is probably what I should have called this podcast. After punishing the director for his insolence, we cut to the opening credits and the Murder, She Wrote theme song, which goes on and on and on. I would play it for you, except I'm wary of lawyers. You might think it would be impossible to enforce copyright in a post-apocalyptic world, but you'd be very fucking wrong. I've seen the lawyers that wander in the wasteland, and I've seen the destruction left in their wake. They hunt in packs, reciting obscure regulations while legislating malefactors limb from limb out of some demented sense of justice. And when it comes to copyright enforcement, Let's just say their version of cease and desist leaves you deceased and disemboweled. Anyway, the theme song is quite pleasant. The pilot has an extended version which serves as the score for a montage with scenes of Jessica doing stuff around Cabot Cove, Maine, her picturesque hometown. We see her jogging, riding a bike, typing away at a typewriter, painting her house black, writing at a typewriter, dangling a child over a precipice while brandishing a knife, using a typewriter, and lots of waving to people and smiling. I think they're trying to tell us that she's very active for an old, that she's friendly with the other villagers, she's definitely writing something, and most importantly, that she's happy, for which I resent her. The credits end with her getting a telephone call from her nephew Grady, a nondescript, milquetoast, caucasoidal human male with beady little eyes and light blue slacks. He's also wearing his watch upside down, like some sort of special forces soldier man, despite admitting that he's a corporate accountant for a seafood restaurant based in New York. He tells Jessica that he found her manuscript,
My book!
and that he took the fucking liberty of sending it to a publisher on her behalf. Now, Grady lives in New York, which is in New York, so how he found her manuscript, which is in Maine, without her sending it to him is the only mystery so far. Well, it turns out that the publisher wants to do with her book the thing from which their name is derived. She humbly declares,
Just because somebody wants to publish my book doesn't mean anyone will bother to read it.
Jump cut to her picture in the window of a bookstore with a little sign that says number 8 bestseller. Then the shopkeep exchanges the sign for one that says number 2 bestseller, as Jessica watches and rolls her eyes in disbelief. And so, she's famous now. She's invited on various television programs to talk about her book or whatever. They specifically mentioned someone called Phil Donahue.
Phil Donahue?
Donahue, I may die.
Who I guess is very attractive to old ladies or something, although I couldn't find much about him in my cursory search before losing interest. He has a Wikipedia entry, but it just says, he the Oprah Winfrey of old mans, and that's it. And there's only one picture, and it's some sort of salad. Or still, no references. You know, when the Wikipedia servers were destroyed and Wikipedia picked up the slack, there was a significant decline in the quality of entries. Anyhowdy, her friends insist that she can't go on television looking frumpy, so it's time for a makeover. The makeover montage lasts all of about 45 seconds and consists of her getting her hair done and trying on a dress that makes her look like a candy cane. And that's it. In the next scene, she gets off a train in New York. She thanks the conductor by name and then says some other stuff, implying that she's made a personal connection with a stranger like some sort of well-socialized human being. She is then brought to meet Preston Giles, the head of the publishing company. Apropos of fucking nothing, she asks him if he eats apples, and goes on to tell him that apples have pectin in them, which makes one's complexion less shit. He admits that he hasn't been sleeping well lately, for which she prescribes
Apples.
Yes, thank you.
Cut to her being run through a gauntlet of book signings, interviews, and interactions with a variety of scumbags. The montage culminates with Jessica being served a subpoena by a lady claiming she stole our story. So Jessica runs away, back to the train station to get the shit out of town. Mr. Giles shows up with flowers and asks why she's leaving.
These last few days I've been insulted, browbeaten, and patronized, and I say no thank you. You know, back in Cabot Cove, the only thing we have with claws are lobsters, and we eat them.
He apologizes for her harrowing experience and invites her to a shindig at his big old mansion in the countryside, assuring her that she'll get to meet people who don't suck farts. Charmed by his old man ways, she relents. So they have a nice drive in his convertible and talk about self-important media types and become friends and develop whatever you call sexual tension between elderly people. Sexual hypertension, I guess. At the Giles mansion, we see an old guy wearing a sailor hat and a shooting blouse. The kind with the padded shoulder thing. This turns out to be Caleb, the captain, who is the owner of the seafood zaibatsu that Grady works for. The captain's shooting skeet about 10 feet from some extras swimming in a pool. And I guess this is normal because there's a gun rack cabinet thing with a little shingle roof permanently installed next to the pool. And I'm sure nothing will come of that. Next, we meet the captain's hard-drinking, resentful wife, Louise, who interrupts her husband's shooting to be snarky.
Really shooting well today.
You want to try it? It just takes a clear eye and a steady hand.
No, thank you. If I'm going to make a fool of myself, let me choose my own pratfall.
Louise then introduces herself to Jessica, saying nice things about her book, and in the next breath complains to Mr. Giles that her husband has invited his female assistant Ashley, the one with the slinky walk. Then there's a loud noise overhead, which turns out to be the sonic boom of an airplane from the nearby airplane repository. Then Louise asks,
Jessica, who are you coming as tonight?
What?
She hasn't decided.
Oh, well, when you do, let me know. I don't want to duplicate.
Come as what? What is she talking about?
So sorry, I should have told you. The party tonight, we're all coming as our favorite fictional character. I know you haven't got a thing to wear.
Well, I could always come as Lady Godiva.
Thankfully, the Wookiee entry for Lady Godiva seems to have escaped molestation by idiots and is actually explanatory. The legend tells that a princess called Lady Godiva got nude and rode her horse through town in some sort of old-timey protest. And all the peasants, having heard what was happening, respectfully stayed in their huts or looked away, all except for one creep called Tom. And it is from this legend that we derive the term peeping Tom for the voyeurist species of pervert. That also explains why Jessica turned around to wink and make the chick-chick sound after suggesting it. The party is now in full swing, with all sorts of kooky costumed characters arriving. Jessica appears wearing a poofy pink dress with all manner of sequins and shiny accoutrements, topped with a tiara and carrying a magic wand the size of a shepherd's crook. She explains that she's Cinderella's fairy godmother. Luckily, I know the story of Cinderella without having to look it up. Essentially, it's a parable to teach women that only divine intervention and being attractive will allow them to escape the misery of the lower classes. There's something about feet in there, too. Small feet being preferable or something. More pervert stuff, I guess. I never paid much attention to it because I'm a male and was made to understand that my lower socioeconomic status was due to my being lazy and un-American, and that it doesn't matter what I look like as long as I have money. Thankfully, class distinctions are not well maintained now that society has collapsed as a result of it. The party is now in fuller swing, and we're introduced to Peter, an unsuccessful yet ostentatious composer or playwright or something. His importance to the story is not at all clear, but the main thing is that he has mutton chops. Then we see Captain Caleb, dressed as Sherlock Holmes, who, under the gaze of his mistress Ashley, places his hand on the butt meat of a vapid-looking Red Riding Hood, presumably some new mistress. We cut to Grady and his girlfriend taking a walk outside. Did I mention Grady had a girlfriend? No, because I don't care. Her name is Kitty, she works for the publishing company, and she permits Grady to poke around in her guts sometimes. That is the extent of her characterization thus far. As they get down to some smooching, Grady notices that someone is waving a flashlight around in his room upstairs. Cue action music. Grady rushes up to the room and immediately punches the stranger in his old man face, and then they gently grapple for a while, being sure to knock over as much of the set dressing as possible. Then the stranger makes a run for it, completely unawares that Jessica is waiting around the corner. She clotheslines the guy with her staff and then puts on an intimidating display with a butterfly knife, which she produced from I know not where. Grady immediately barfs, which I guess is some kind of autonomic response to stress or something. And then they really want you to appreciate the barf because they do a super slow zoom into what looks like a can of cold mushroom soup dumped out on the carpet. And then it fades to black, which I guess is where a commercial break would have been. But when it fades back in, they're still zooming in on that puke. It's a very weird directorial decision, and I have no idea what they were going for. They drag the mysterious intruder into Mr. Giles' office and begin questioning him. He turns out to be a private investigator by the name of Dexter Baxendale. He refuses to tell them who or what he's investigating on account of his being so professionally discreet.
I have been retained by a very influential individual to conduct a discreet investigation. With Dexter Baxendale, discretion is a way of life. And my card.
Instead of hooking a car battery up to each of his discreet nipples as any competent interrogator would have done, Mr. Giles instead threatens to call the police.
Oh, you may turn me over to the local constable, Mr. Giles. But no amount of coercion will force me to betray a trust.
Dexter D. Baxendale, the D is for discretion, confidently explains that once the local newspapers are made aware of his investigation, a lot of unwanted attention will be paid to the guests in attendance. This is apparently a substantial enough threat that Mr. Giles reluctantly lowers a phone back onto its house, where it lives. Mr. Giles asks Grady to escort Dexter Baxendale out the back way to his motor car, which I assume is tasteful and Italian. However, before he can be hustled away, he compliments Jessica on her work.
It was a great pleasure meeting you, Mrs. Fletcher. You have a rare gift for murder. Continued success.
Why, thank you, I think.
Then he gazes at a statue of Lady Justice by the door and exclaims that he's deduced which character Mr. Giles is dressed as.
It's Edmond Dante, isn't it? The Count of Monte Cristo.
Very good, Mr. Baxendale. I'm almost sorry I'm throwing you out. You might have made a charming guest.
Yes, of course he would have made a charming guest, Mr. Giles. He's the most charming and engaging character thus far. I wish he was my dad. Alas, just like my real dad, he is escorted out of my life by an accountant wearing a fake mustache. As I remember it anyway. Folks, here's some wasteland wisdom. Ethanol is for drinking, and methanol makes for ungood thinking. Downstairs, with the party in its most fullerest swing yet, we see Louise totally blitzed, bibulous, besotted, and or blotto. She stumbles up to the captain and demands loudly to be taken home. He rudely suggests that she leave without him. Distraught, Louise fumbles for her keys on the way to the door, followed closely by Jessica, who attempts to dissuade her from driving in her emboozled state. As Grady returns from escorting Dexter, Louise pushes her way past and out the front door. Jessica spins an exasperated Grady back around and tells him to help Louise home.
No, I can manage.
You're in no condition, Mrs.
Leave me
McCallum.
alone.
Please, let me have your
God
keys.
save
Come on.
you, leave
Okay,
me
it's okay,
alone.
really. Jeez.
As expected, Grady fails this simple task and is shoved to the ground by a drunk 40-something woman dressed as a flapper. And so, Louise speeds off into that cold country night. If every failure is an opportunity to learn, I would give Grady a grade F. Back inside, some irrelevant characters comment on the captain's recent unpresence. Ashley bitterly points out that Little Red Riding Hood hasn't been seen either, and then spills martini down her dress. Jessica tells her that they should immediately get the stain out, then picks her up in a fireman's carry and bounds into the kitchen where Mr. Giles is just getting off the telephone. Jessica grabs a medley of things from the fridge, begins mixing them, and then asks Preston what that was about, saying he oughtn't be doing work on a Saturday night. He tells her that it was
A very persistent reporter from the New York Times. He insists on interviewing you first thing Monday morning. I told him he left for Pango Pango and weren't expected back till the turn of the century.
Good for you.
I don't know what that is, but I'm not eating it.
Well, it's an old Fletcher recipe. Guaranteed to take the spots off of a leopard.
Jessica then drags Ashley upstairs to get nude so she can apply her folksy dairy-based stain remover. Back in the parlor, a spastic female Peter Pan harasses a drunk Peter Mutton Chops into playing the piano. And then we get one of those dissolving shots of a clock to show the passage of time. It's now 6 in the ante-meridian. The harsh light of day reveals a butler, butlering the aftermath of the hootenanny, working around an insufferably old Humpty Dumpty passed out on a love seat. We see Jessica jogging in the woods surrounding the estate when a car pulls up and stops.
Good morning, Louise.
Don't tell me I look like hell, I feel worse, and I'm in no mood for a lecture.
Louise has come to collect her adulterous husband who never returned home. Their idle chit-chat is soon interrupted by a milk-curdling scream. Grady's girlfriend Kitty has discovered Sherlock Holmes floating face down in the pool with a blood-drenched shotgun nearby. We also see the door to the poolside gun cabinet standing open. And I totally called that. You heard it. I'm the Jessica now. Louise rushes forward to see her dead misogynist, but Jessica stops her and performs a gentle suplex to quell the onset of hysteria. Cut to the body being taken away in an awful 70s brown-colored ambulance, followed by a slow zoom into an even worse 70s green cop car, and an actor dressed as a police officer pretending to be on the radio.
Yeah, Madge, the name's Caleb McCallum. You know that seafood guy? Of course, that's unofficial. The chief won't let the wife identify. It's just as well the guy got his face blown off with a 12 gauge.
All the not Jessica characters are gathered in a sitting room, being addressed by Police Chief Roy Gunderson, played by Ned Beatty, who you may remember from such films as Network, Chattahoochee, Drug-Free Kids, A Parent's Guide, or Deliverance, in which he pretends to be a pig very briefly. I am also morally obligated to say the following. Gunderson, I hardly know her son. Gunderson is as hard-nosed, hard-headed, and hard-boiled as any gumshoed flatfoot walking the beat, and he's let them know in no uncertain terms that they got a genuine, bona fide whodunit on their hands. Oh, and the facts. He wants 'em, and how, but also right now. As Gunderson addresses the guests, Jessica can be seen passing back and forth outside the window in a number of humorous investigative poses, marked by playful musical cues.
In other words, somebody killed him last night. Maybe while your party was going on. And nobody heard a shot. From a 12-gauge shotgun?
Chief, the party was noisy. It was chilly, so the windows were closed. The pool some distance from the house.
Suppose you tell me what happened here last night, Mr. Giles. Folks don't go around getting half their heads blown off for no reason. I'm looking for motive.
For killing Caleb McCallum? Surely you jest. Half the country had reason to kill him. The other half didn't know him.
Not funny, friend.
But accurate.
Roy posits queries, Louise has a bit of a cry, blah 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 blah. Eventually, Gunderson notices Jessica's antics and goes outside to speak with her. Jessica is in the process of scaling a trellis on the side of the house when Roy does the cough cough interruptus and she reluctantly comes down. I'm just going to play the majority of their conversation because it includes some choice exposition and some primo deductivizing. And I can't be fucking bothered to summarize it.
I beg your pardon, Chief Gunderson. I was just checking something out. I probably should have asked you first, but I didn't disturb any evidence, believe me.
I read your book.
Oh, you did? How nice.
Didn't say I liked it. Said I read it. So, what do you think?
I beg your pardon?
You know people, ma'am. I can tell that. You see the little things, the inconsistencies. So, what do you think about Mrs. McCallum?
Well, surely she's not a suspect, is she?
At the moment, she is the suspect.
She is? Oh, my goodness. Chief, did Mr. Giles tell you about last night's intruder?
Oh, you mean the private eye from New York? You think he killed the captain?
Oh, no, not at all. But I'm sure you noticed the shoes on the body floating in the swimming pool.
Shoes?
Now, last night at the party, Captain Caleb was wearing black patent leather, highly polished.
Is that so?
Now, that private detective was discovered on the second floor. I'm almost sure that he got in through that window. Now, look here. You see this broken plant? And there, that footprint. Now, in order to climb up to that window, that detective would have had to be wearing soft rubber-soled shoes.
What are you telling me? The guy in the pool wasn't McCallum? Sure as hell wasn't.
So, Captain Lothario ain't dead. But that means Dexter Baxendale is dead.
Discretion.
I think I speak for us all when I say that he was really something. Well, que sera, sera. So Louise sees that the captain is alive, rushes over to hug him, then slaps him, then stamps off. And then we get a playful little musical sting while Caleb shrugs. So they're depicting an abusive relationship and using it as comic relief. That's fucking garbage, and I can't think of anything humorous to add. Speaking of add, let's take a short break for some. In the meantime, I'll try to remember a joke. I'm sorry. Well, we don't have any paying sponsors this week, so our first sponsor is Cooter. Thanks, Cooter. Our second sponsor is shotguns. I wish I had a shotgun. Alright, that's it. Now back to the show. I'm sorry. Who's there? Ash. Ash who? Gesundheit. That's the only joke I know by heart. The captain reveals that it was he himself whom hired the late great Dexter Baxendale to investigate the leak of confidential information. Confidential information of a corporate nature. Confidential seafood restaurant information. What sort of information that could possibly be, I do not know, but I will go out of my way to speculate. Genetically modified tilapia. They have a third fillet built right in because they're triangular now. The jumbo shrimp are actually normal-sized shrimp, and the non-jumbo shrimp are actually jumbo sea monkeys. Their Old Bay seasoning, criminally old. Price fixing. That's a thing. Or maybe discrepancies with their taxes? Grady is their accountant, so that seems the most probable explanation. The captain says that Dexter said that he was onto something, and then suggests that perhaps he broke into the house in order to speak to the captain privately. Sure. That sounds reasonable.
That still doesn't explain what he was doing in your Sherlock Holmes costume.
Caleb says he doesn't know. He left the party early to get some fresh air with Red Riding Hood at a motel.
That still doesn't explain the costume.
I put it in the front closet. I wasn't going to go prancing through the lobby of that motel looking like a refugee from a costume ball.
Well, Detective Roy says he'll have to check up on Caleb's alibi, but agrees to let the other guests leave. Mr. Giles sees Jessica to a limo he's hired to take her back to New York, apologizes for the inconvenience of someone being fucking murdered, and says he has to stay behind to sort shit out. He then gives her a peck on the cheek and sends her on her way. And then the camera lingers on Mr. Giles' face, which is wearing this weird forced smile cringe thing. There's either something suspicious about Preston Giles, or he's getting out a fart that he's been saving up all weekend. And boy, howdy, I've been there, folks. You're courting a potential partner, trying to make a good impression, but your body betrays you, and you desperately need to rip ass, but a safe opportunity never presents itself. And then when they leave the room, you risk it, but it just refuses to dissipate, and they come back to you quickly, and you've got visible stink lines emanating from you, and they enter your miasma, and then they ask if you have a medical condition, and then they ask you to leave. As the limo pulls away, police boy Roy waves them down from the end of the driveway. He asks the driver to take him to HQ and then just hops on in, says he wants to have a private chat, and aggressively requests her thoughts on the case.
Chief, really, this is none of my business.
I'm making it your business.
Well, the point is, someone killed Sherlock Holmes.
That New York gumshoe was no Sherlock Holmes.
But he was, Chief. At least he was the moment that he was killed. The question is, did the killer know that he was?
What?
You're investigating the murder of a private detective. Now, suppose the killer didn't know that it was Mr. Baxendale. Suppose the killer thought it was Captain Caleb. After all, the captain was the one wearing the Sherlock Holmes outfit all night.
What?
Roy is patiently made to understand that the killer most likely thought they were killing the captain, rather than Dexter Baxendale.
Between church and football and the fact the town council never calls me, this is my favorite day of the week. Miss Fletcher, you just made this the worst Sunday I've spent in 10 years.
Back at her hotel, Jessica is packing her suitcase while Grady reads a newspaper article regarding the murder. He then suggests that Jessica could solve the case, and she replies that she's only a substitute English teacher and that she's already promised to fill in for a friend. Grady says blah blah blah, to which she replies,
The truth is, I want to go back. Look, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I don't have much use for city life. And you know, frankly, except for you and Kid Donovan, I don't much care for the people either.
Even Preston Giles?
Grady suggests that she should call Preston before leaving. Well, Jessica gets up in his face and tells him it's fucking uncouth for him to play matchmaker for his aunt.
I'm sorry you guys didn't hit it off.
Oh, but don't you see? That's the trouble. We were beginning to hit it off much too well.
I'm not sure what she means by that, and I lack the emotional intelligence necessary to speculate. So she's back at the train station where her conductor friend Daniel greets her and is about to help her onto the train when Kitty comes running up.
Jessica! Oh, Mrs. Fletcher! Oh, thank God I caught you.
What's the matter, child?
Oh, it's Grady. He's been arrested.
Arrested? For what?
For suspicion of murder.
At the police station, Jessica insists that Gunderson is a gosh darn fool if he believes Grady to be the murderer. And considering Jessica is the protagonist of this here show, she's probably right, unfortunately. Gunderson seems willing to believe that Grady is innocent of the murder, saying,
He seems to be a nice young man. For a thief.
A thief? What are you talking about?
He's been stealing confidential information from his company.
But he goes on to say that facts is facts, ma'am. Having located Dexter's car that morning, they found a stolen real estate report in the glove box. And this here report was worth a buku sum of money. Roy claims that only Grady and Ashley Vickers, the captain's secra mistress, had access to it and are both being interrogated presently. However, Baxendale was caught creeping in Grady's room.
Baxendale could have been in my nephew's room by accident. The first floor bathroom was out of order. People were traipsing up and down the staircase all night. That detective could have ducked into Grady's room to avoid being seen.
That's weak, Mrs. Fletcher. That's very weak.
Now, second, if Grady were the thief, his fingerprints would have been all over that report.
We checked the fingerprints. They're all kind of smudged.
And third, have you also checked the bank accounts? Grady's account, I know it's anemic. But what about Miss Vickers?
Roy claims they're looking into it, but he ain't, because he didn't even think of that. To Jessica's relief, Preston appears and says he has a fancy-pants lawyer that's arranged for Grady's immediate release. Cut to them all meeting at a restaurant across the street to discuss the situation. All except for Gunderson. He probably wasn't invited. They then have an important conversation, cram-jammed with exposition and revelations, and as you may be noticing, I just cannot be fucking bothered to summarize.
That Baxendale had a reputation as a cheap blackmailer.
Well, what's that got to do with Grady?
Well, the way the police figured, Baxendale got the goods on Grady, then came back to the party to confront him, probably to extort a payoff. Baxendale took the Sherlock Holmes costume out of the front closet so he could mingle, and lured Grady out to the pool area. They think that Grady lost his temper and shot him with a skeet gun.
Oh, fiddle-faddle. Mr. Baxendale was a detective, not a mind reader. How could he possibly have known that costume was in the hall closet? They're not thinking clearly.
Well, even so, there must be a reason he was dressed that way.
Oh, of course. And once we can figure out why, I suspect we'll know who. Which brings me to the subject of Miss Vickers. Now, would she have taken that report, you think?
Are you kidding? 2 years ago, she was low gal in the steno pool. Then all of a sudden, she and the captain are practicing indoor Olympics in hotel rooms all over town.
Kit.
Well, it's the truth, isn't it? Then for the last few months, she gets frozen out. Oh, not her job. She's too smart for that. But the captain's got himself another bunkmate. Now, if you ask me, that gives her a hell of a good reason.
Well, while Kitty is describing an erotic form of pole vaulting, Jessica notices Ashley enter the restaurant. Jessica walks over and invites her to join their group, suggesting they might be able to help one another. Ashley declines and smugglishly explains that she's no longer a suspect. Turns out some neighbors reported hearing the shotgun fired around 11:15, which is when Jessica was helping Ashley get Martini out of her dress. And thus she's off the hook. Hook, fishing, seafood restaurant. There's a joke in there somewhere. I'll let you work this one out for yourself. It'll be like you're helping. Cut to Jessica and Preston in a taxi. Preston insists that his big city lawyer will exonerate Grady, but Jessica isn't so sure. Preston tells her that this weekend and the time they've spent together was really swell and whatnot. You know, before the whole murder thing. Jessica's like, yeah, well, I'm not really interested. And then she reveals that she'll be going back to Maine as soon as Grady is free to menace the city once more. Preston gets out at his office, hands the driver a 20, and tells him to take the lady to her hotel. So genteel. However, Jessica has some investigating to do first. And fortunately for her pack-an-hour, hey, I'm a New Yorkin here driver, she has a foot ointment to recommend.
Driver, do you know a place called, where was it? I had it here someplace. It was Bayview, Baytown.
We got a Bay Ridge, lady. That's in Brooklyn. Over in Jersey, you got your Bayonne. Now out on the island, you got your Bay Shore, your Bayville, your Bayside.
Bayside, that's it. Bayside Yacht Club. Would you mind driving me there?
For $20.
Oh, I'm prepared to make up the difference.
Look, lady, to tell you the truth, I want to get home. My feet are killing me. What's your hurry? Yeah, I know. Guys at my job are supposed to have a problem someplace else. But with me, it's my feet. What could I tell you? Some joke, huh?
Oh, no. They can be terribly painful. My friend Lena Miller, she had the most awful time for years. She had these little calluses. They were like corns, only they weren't corns.
That's what I got.
Oh, then you must try some of our ointment.
Nah, listen, I tried all that stuff.
Oh, not ours you haven't. Back home, we make it ourselves.
Get away. You know, my old man's got the same problem. I think it's heretical.
Apparently, Jessica is full to burst with recipes for folksy poultices to solve all the problems of modern life. With the exception of buckshot to the dome, I guess. I envy her ability to make friends with people from all walks of life. Honestly, I can barely maintain an acquaintanceship with my own goddamn self.
Oh, dear. I was sure I brought more cash with me. I don't suppose you take a credit card. Oh, I didn't think you would.
Look, Mrs. Fletcher, you going to be in there long?
Well, not if I can help it.
Okay, then I'll tell you what. I'll wait for you here, and I'll drive you back to City off the meter.
Oh, Bernie, I couldn't ask you to do that.
Well, what are you going to do? Take a subway? Forget about it, Mrs. Fletcher. You go do what you got to do, and I'll be here reading the paper, all right?
You're very kind.
I know. I'm a real prince.
At the yacht club, Jessica locates Captain Misogynist putzing around on his yacht, which is named Chowder Cook. I'm not familiar with the word cuck, but I could be misreading it. To be fair, it's in this bizarre font that's all squished together. You'd think Caleb could afford a painter with a basic grasp of kerning. Alas, the captain reluctantly welcomes her aboard and then politely asks what the fuck she wants. She tells him that they've arrested Grady, to which he replies that the evidence against him is conclusive.
Evidence? You've been talking to Chief Gunderson.
Gunderson is an incompetent fool. However, in this case, I think he does have his facts correct.
What facts are those?
Well, I told you, someone in my organization has been stealing information. This information is about proposed sites for my chowder houses. These leaks have cost me a great deal of money. Baxendale narrowed the list of suspects down to 6. And at his suggestion, I made those 6 people, and only those 6, aware of a confidential report that I'd received. The report was a phony, of course. I also let it be known that I'd be acting on that information on Monday.
So, the suspected 6 were kept under surveillance by Baxendale, who then followed Grady and Ashley to the party where he was able to find the stolen report. Presumably in Grady's room, although there's no way of knowing for sure now that Baxendale is Bax in hell. Or maybe Bax in heaven. I never met the man, who knows? Jessica tries to point out that the murderer may have intended to murderize Caleb.
Mrs. Fletcher, you're a very shrewd cookie, but you're barking up the wrong tree. All my employees know that I am Captain Caleb's chowder houses, okay? Without me, the whole thing falls apart. And as for my wife, Louise, we have a prenuptial agreement. As long as I'm alive, she lives like a queen. If I die, she gets next to nothing. There goes your theory of mistaken identity.
Like, fuck this guy, seriously. Outside her hotel, Jessica tells the driver that she'll go get his money, but he refuses, saying that the recipe for foot juice is worth more to him.
Be sure to put it on for a half hour every night for a week. And don't forget to write to me and let me know how it worked.
You bet. Take it easy, Mrs. F.
Fucking ridiculous. Back in her room, she calls Grady and tells him that she's going to prove that Ashley was the stealer, and Grady's going to get her into Caleb's office. Or else.
Swell. They can tack on breaking and entering onto my murder 1 sentence.
So, to the office they go. On the way, Jessica explains that Ashley must have had an accomplice. Why would she have risked bringing the stolen report to the party if not to give it to someone there? And since Jessica was with Ashley during the time of the murder, it must have been her accomplice that gunned down my idol. Inside the building, in an interaction with the night watchman, Grady gives a powerful demonstration of his mastery over social engineering and the criminal arts.
Working late tonight, huh?
No. I mean, I'm not working. I'm showing my aunt where I work. This is my aunt visiting from Maine.
How do, ma'am? I hope you're enjoying your stay.
Oh, it's been a rare experience, believe me.
We shouldn't be very long.
Oh, that's all right.
Of course, we could be quite a while. But there's a lot to see. Don't worry if we're up there a long time.
Jessica yanks Grady into the elevator, and he waves awkwardly with one hand and pounds the closed door button with the other. Upstairs, Grady throws up again. They have a cliche pull-yourself-together moment where Jessica grabs a hysterical Grady by the collar, slaps him around a bit, and then sends him to dig up some names from the computized real estate records. She creeps into Ashley's office and starts going through some folders while sneaky action music plays. Suddenly, we hear a bing-bong sound from the elevator. Elevators used to make a sound when they got to whatever floor you chose. I'm not really sure why this was necessary. You'd think the doors opening would make it obvious, but I'm not really the person to ask. The person to ask is a guy called Randall. I think he lives in Waco now, but he's really into elevator stuff. Anyway, Jessica peeks through the door and realizes that it's not Grady fleeing, but Ashley arriving. So she hides in a closet or something as Ashley strolls in. Ashley unlocks a cabinet, transfers a definitely the evidence folder into her gigantic 80s purse. And then, she's walking towards the closet. Her hand is almost at the knob.
Hello. Thank you for calling the Star Trek Addiction Hotline. To speak to a representative in English, press 1. For Spanish, press 2. For Klingon, press K. You have selected Klingon because you are a nerd. Please hold while we get the one guy we have for this. That sound is to warn you that an operator is coming.
Luckily, the telephone rings just in time. Ashley answers, and it turns out to be her partner in crime. She agrees to meet with them and then leaves the office, forgetting whatever she wanted out of the closet, which is real convenient. Jessica waits until the elevator is closed, whispers for Grady, like twice, and then just leaves without him. She runs out of the building, past the guard who calls after her, and spots Ashley getting onto a bus. Jessica marches into the middle of the street, calling out for a taxi.
Oh, taxi! Can you follow that bus?
Are you kidding me, lady? You know where that thing's going?
But that's the trouble. I don't know where it's going.
She is nearly obliterated by another bus, the door of which she starts banging on like a crazy person, and the driver actually lets her on. I guess clawing at the door like a fucking zombie was acceptable bus hailing technique at the time. She asks the especially lethargic bus driver if they're going to the same place as that other bus, the one like 10 feet ahead of them.
That's the way it works, lady. Up the street, down the street. 75 cents.
Oh, yes, of course.
Exact change, lady.
Well, she doesn't have exact change, but you know who does, sort of. Anne Ramsey, the scary mean lady from the Goonies. She's sporting a 5-barrel chrome-plated belt-mounted change-giver thingy and apparently sits behind the bus driver all day screwing people out of small change.
You must do quite well.
Beats hell out of welfare, sweetie.
Jessica is so helplessly provincial that she tries to hand the coins directly to the bus driver. And while she's fumbling with her purse, we cut to a young black guy wearing a scowl and a denim jacket. So I guess he's a baddie. Immediately after paying, we see Ashley exiting her bus, so Jessica demands to be let off too. The driver tells her that they only stop at designated spots, but he'll make an exception in order to get her out of his increasingly miserable life. This man, this driver of men, this George the bus driver, with his careworn face and shiny pate, what mistakes, what sins befitted him to this life, this so-called life, this waking nightmare? And why is he the only character capable of resisting Jessica's rural charms? Perhaps things would be different if she had offered him some venerable Fletcher family potion to revitalize his bald-ass head. But alas, he sends her forth gladly into that figuratively cold New York night, and the dubious denim dude departs also. Jessica, followed at a distance by the man from the bus, marches down an empty, shadowy street, a street where tough guys might be found loitering. She is then accosted by 2 loitering tough guys. One of them being a young Andy Garcia, the antagonist guy from those Ocean 11 movies. He's wearing a pork pie hat and credited here as First White Tough. Politely insisting that they let her pass doesn't seem to do it, so she bashes them with her purse and makes a run for it. They catch up with her and struggle to force her down a stereotypical alleyway while assuring her that she will be stabbed. At this point, she gets an arm free and sends her elbow into the ribs of the man, attempting to contain her fury. She then headbutts the man in front of her, grabs the arm holding the knife, and breaks it over her knee. And suddenly, the guy from the bus joins in on the fray, and together they beat up White Toughs 1 and 2. Back to back in their fighting poses, they turn to face one another and do the handshake thing from Predator that shows off their muscles. The man from the bus laughs and asks, "They got you pushing too many typewriter keys?" Followed by,
"You want some advice? I'd stay out of this neighborhood, Mrs. Fletcher."
You know me?
Yes, ma'am. I recognized you as soon as I saw you back on the bus. I read your book. It's terrific.
So now he's a good guy, and thus they've fabricated expectations in order to subvert them in a very lame way. And that's just good writing. Okay, so I looked it up. I thought the BP handshake was from Predator, but that came out in 87, and this is from 84. So I guess that scene in Predator is like a homage to Murder, She Wrote, which is pretty neat. Anyway, Jessica lost track of Ashley in this scuffle. When Jessica makes it back to her hotel, she's carrying a huge assortment of newspapers. Grady, Grady's Girl Friday, and Mr. Giles have been waiting anxiously for her in the lobby. Grady is also holding a stack of papers, presumably from his computer search. Up in Jessica's room, Kitty searches through the stacks of newspapers, and Grady demonstrates his reliability once again.
I think I hit a wrong button. Instead of real estate transactions, it started spitting out last year's wholesale fish prices.
No matter, says Jessica. She picks up the phone and calls Police Boy Roy.
I believe that your private detective was the intended victim all along. And I suggest that you scour his records to find some connection between Ashley Vickers and that Broadway composer. You remember him, Peter Brill?
Peter?
Ah, yes, the never the obvious suspect trope. The secret partner was that pompous composer the whole time. You know, the one we saw in like 2 scenes who had almost no interaction with any of the main characters.
Can't be serious about Peter Brill.
What do you mean? Don't you remember at the party him telling us about how he was holding auditions for a new musical in a small theater off 17th Street? That's where I lost Ashley Vickers.
That could just be a coincidence.
Oh, I don't think so, Kit. Mr. Brill has been very unsuccessful for several years, yet now he has the funds to mount a new show. I mean, even off-Broadway doesn't come that cheap.
It turns out that Jessica brought the newspapers in order to find an advert or whatever that would reveal the location of the theater, which happens to be on the first page she deigns to pick up. They drive to the theater, and Jessica commands Grady to wait in the car while she goes inside where a very awkward audition is taking place.
You played a trick on my heart, honey.
Peter plays the piano while a woman with voluptuous gazongas croons on stage, watched by a sleazy mafia type with a cigar. A huge effort is made to highlight not only her big hoo-ha, but her stupidity, too.
Wow, Petey, sweetheart, ain't she great, huh?
Yes, Marvin, your client's talent is exceeded only by her monumental capacity for flagellation of the treble clef.
Are we through here? I gotta be on the switchboard by 8:30.
Yes, I've heard all I need to hear. Thank you so much, Miss Devine.
That means I stink, right? Hey, well, listen, buddy. You know, you don't play so hard either.
Yes, but you see, I've had only 2 hours sleep. Whereas with you, sweet thing, the oblivion of Morpheus seems to be a perpetual state of mind.
Oh, yeah!
I hate this. Once Peter is alone, we pan across to see Jessica standing dramatic-like in the shadows. And I believe this is it, folks, the big reveal.
I was hoping we could have a nice little private chat.
Mrs. Fletcher. Well, nothing would delight me more, but not this morning. Perhaps lunch sometime later in the week.
Mr. Brill, tell me about the stolen information that you've been receiving from Ashley Vickers.
My dear lady, I have no idea what you're talking about.
But of course you do. I followed her here last night.
If Ashley chose to sit in on my auditions, that is no reason to assume that we are in league in some clandestine scheme.
Oh, now stop this fiddle faddle. Now, a young man's future is in dire jeopardy because of your shenanigans, and I won't allow it.
At the risk of repeating myself, I do not know what you are talking about.
Peter, give it up.
Ashley appears on the balcony above them and tells Peter that it is indeed futile to continue this fiddle-faddle. And now that they're caught, she's going to go ahead and explain the whole scheme from the beginning, because this is fucking geriatric Scooby-Doo.
Peter and I have enjoyed a perfect partnership. He made enough money to stage a modest comeback, and I had my revenge on Captain Caleb. But murder, you of all people should realize I couldn't possibly have killed that detective.
Yes, of course. What a pity Mr. Brill couldn't have been in the room with us.
What a generous thought. But you needn't concern yourself with me. At the time of that detective's untimely demise, I was seated at the parlor piano, delighting my fellow guests with dozens of melodic gems from my incomparable repertoire.
At this point, Grady appears to make sure that Jessica's all right, and I guess this is supposed to suggest that the two criminals won't be able to hurt Jessica now that Grady's there. Sure. So we cut to Police Boy Roy getting on board the Chowdercuck. He enters the cabin and examines what appear to be bullet holes when two random police officers show up.
Hold it, mister. Stay right there. Now, very slowly. I want your hands over your head, flat against the wood.
I know the drill, son.
Roy establishes that he's the police chief of wherever he is the police chief of, and then all three of them continue the search up on deck. And there, hidden in the folds of the sail, is the body of Captain Asshole. And even after they can clearly see there's a dead body in there, this fucking guy keeps turning the crank until the body flops out onto the deck, which seems kind of rude. Back at the hotel, we see a news report with a news reporter reporting the news of the murder and the arrest of Louise.
I can't believe it.
Why not? The murderer was just rectifying his earlier mistake.
It's so hard to imagine Louise a murderer.
Conveniently, Chalice Peef Roy stops by to wrap up all the loose ends for any easily confused viewers. Louise isn't actually a suspect and was only brought in for questioning. Peter and Ashley went ahead and turned themselves in for the theft of those documents, which was very polite of them. And so, Grady is also off the hook. You can go ahead and insert that joke you made up right here. Your participation is important to us. Roy says that all the aforementioned people have solid alibis for the night of the captain's murder, and so they're back to square one regarding leads. But it's not his jurisdiction and no longer his case, so he's moseying on home.
I just want to say, Miss Fletcher, that I'm proud I met you. You can horn in on one of my cases anytime.
Thanks, Chief. And anytime you're in Maine, you let me cook you up some lobster stew.
I'll do that.
And then Mr. Giles gets his own heartfelt speech.
Despite the insanity that has surrounded our brief acquaintance, these days have been very special to me. You know, over the past several years, I've acquired every luxury a man could want. But I've been operating on automatic pilot, automatic banking, automatic security systems, automatic lights, appliances. I'm a pampered rich man who does nothing for himself, and I'm miserable. Or at least, I have been.
Preston, wait. I do like you. A great deal. But, I'm sorry. This is all moving just too fast for a widow woman from Maine.
I can respect that.
You sure?
Absolutely. Look, Jess, you and I are going to be joined at the hip professionally for a long, long time. If something else is destined to come out of this relationship, so be it. If not, at least I'll have made a very good friend.
And then they kiss, and oh my god, I don't have time for this. Just solve the mystery, lady. You know what? I'm just going to fast forward. Okay, here we go. Back at train station. Kitty saying words about upcoming interviews. Stay out of trouble, Grady, you scamp. Hi, Daniel, the conductor. Yes, I'm really leaving this time. Polite conversation. Reminiscing about the time in New York. Reading of newspaper. Newspaper prompts jumping off train for some reason. Take a different train. Take a cab to the murder mansion. Murder mansion is dark and spooky now. Snooping around by the pool. Mr. Giles show up? Okay, well, I guess I was wrong, folks. This is the big reveal, the real reveal, the corporeal confrontation, the tangible telling of the tale, the Scooby-Dooby-Doo over. Jessica has solved the mystery, and now she's going to tell us how, in as few words as possible, I hope.
Automatic lights. I'd hoped I was wrong. They went on at 8 o'clock. When did they shut off?
Midnight? But what's the point?
Point is, the murder occurred at 11:15. The point is, the killer knew exactly who his victim was. Or more specifically, Preston. You knew you were shooting that detective.
Never mind, she talks for a while.
Is that it?
No, of course it isn't. There were lots of little things that didn't mean anything at the time, but now I understand.
And so she tells all the little things, which include minor events that I didn't really highlight because I didn't know they were relevant, and I summarize each scene as I watch. Oops. In summary, 1. Mr. Giles was the only other person who knew Baxendale was at the house, and Baxendale seemed to recognize Mr. Giles right before they let him go. 2. Mr. Giles promised Jessica that his lawyer would exonerate Grady because he was already planning to murder the captain in order to support the theory that the killer was really after the captain the whole time. 3. Mr. Giles lied about a phone call he got while Jessica was in the kitchen mixing up stain remover. It was actually Baxendale telling Mr. Giles that he knew his secret identity and to meet him by the pool in order to arrange his blackmail. You know, by the pool where the shotguns live. 4. Mr. Giles' complexion is bad because he don't eat apples, and statistics indicate that people who don't eat apples are more likely to do a murder. 5. Point 4 is true. Anyway, that's pretty much it. The relationship between these minor occurrences is extremely tenuous. A lot of it is left pretty vague, and Jessica, being able to weave all of these details into the realization that Mr. Giles had a secret identity the whole time, defies belief. And that's why she's such an amazing detective. I could never have figured that out. Well, now that she's explained how she solved the case, it's time for Mr. Giles to explain it all over again, plus his whole fucking life story. My God.
Insisted I meet him by the pool at 11 o'clock. The subject was blackmail. I couldn't go through that. Not after all these years. I was in a blind rage. I took a gun and shot him. When I realized how easily I could have been seen, if anyone had been outside, they could have heard the shot. Many years ago, I was betrayed by 3 partners in a business venture. An apartment house we'd built collapsed. Several people were killed. Although I had nothing to do with the construction end, I was made the scapegoat. They got off free, and I was sentenced to 15 years in prison. After 2 years, I managed to escape. Don't ask the details, but the police assumed I died in the attempt.
Like the Count of Monte Cristo.
As you well know, my favorite fictional character. Well, not everyone was convinced that I was dead. The hotshot detective 3rd grade had a hunch that I was still alive. He became even more positive when, over the next couple of years, like the Count of Monte Cristo, I financially destroyed my 3 ex-partners from a safe distance. Saturday was the first time I'd seen him in 22 years, and I didn't recognize him. But obviously he recognized me. He changed his name as I had, but I knew that if the police ever started poking around his files, sooner or later they'd come across me.
Yes, the files. That's why you dressed Baxendale up in the Sherlock Holmes outfit. To make the police think that the killer had intended to kill Caleb. You had to divert attention away from Baxendale.
Yes. He was a slimy blackmailer, Jess. He threatened to destroy my life. Morally, it was a case of self-defense.
Preston, even if I could bring myself to believe that, there's no way that you can justify the murdering of Caleb McCallum, and you did kill him. For the same reason, to divert suspicion from yourself.
Caleb wasn't much of a human being either.
Oh, he didn't deserve killing. No one deserves killing.
Yeah, well, that's certainly an opinion. At this point, despite her feelings for him, Jessica is forced to face the reality of the situation and breaks down crying. Mr. Giles comes over to comfort her, and then the sinister music starts up. We get some dramatic low-angle shots, which would require the cameraman to be standing in the pool, so that's fun. And then Mr. Giles' hands move up her shoulders and sort of linger around her neck, which is fun. And then, with the music building to a crescendo,
I'm going to talk to Gunderson. Would you go with me?
either he's a good person or you realize that Jessica's neck is way too thick for his old man hands to strangle effectively. So, she solved the mystery of the stolen documents and found the killer. Through her hard work, her down-home charm, and her no-fiddle-faddle attitude, she was able to convince these criminals that doing bad things is bad, and they should feel bad. And thus, they are left with no recourse but to turn themselves in, just like in real life. Back at the train station, she tells Grady that she is fucking out, not coming back, ever. No way, no how.
I've had enough murders, enough puzzles, enough suspects. You know, I don't even think I'm going to write another book.
Sure you will. And I'll be the first one to read it.
Jessica sends a right hook into Grady's bland face and tells him to keep his fucking dick beaters off her manuscripts. And then Katie comes sprinting up the platform for the third and final time.
Oh, thank God I caught you.
Yeah, what's the matter?
Oh, the police, they've been trying to find you all morning. They won't say, but I think they need your help.
Help from me?
Well, the bodies of 2 dead wrestlers were found this morning at Madison Square Garden. They were lying in the middle of the ring. One had been stabbed and the other drowned.
She interrupts Katie with a haymaker, and we see a few teeth get ejected from her face, one of which flies directly into Grady's open mouth, and he immediately pukes. Looking at the two of them doubled over, Jessica cracks her knuckles, high-fives the conductor, and climbs aboard.
Goodbye, children, and don't forget to write. It's been wonderful being with you both. Take care.
Well, that's it. We successfully made it through the pilot episode. Conclusion. I will now tell you why this episode sucked. The awful, lazy writing. First, the lighthearted depiction of the abusive relationship between Caleb and Louise was totally fucked. Next, contextualizing the black guy on the bus as malicious and then artificially subverting it was ignorant, manipulative garbage. Next, the audition scene was so cartoonishly sexist and out of place that it felt like satire. It was totally unnecessary to the story, and I cannot understand why it was included. My final complaint is that I found the climax ridiculous and annoying. Jessica made some huge leaps of logic in order to tie everything up. The clues which led her to conclude that Mr. Giles had a secret identity were totally vague and forced. A mystery is not entertaining unless the audience is able to piece the clues together alongside the protagonist. But hey, someone thought this was good enough to deserve a full season, followed by 11 more, a crossover episode, a spin-off show, a board game, and a couple video games. So what the fuck do I know? Now, here's what I liked. Angela Lansbury. That's it. She's the driving force of the show, and the only reason I didn't turn the episode off and throw the DVDs off a cliff. She's charismatic and charming and engaging to watch. I like her folksiness and her absurd ability to make friends with anyone on Earth, with the exception of bus drivers, I guess. Other than that, the music was okay, the acting was okay, the cinematography was okay, and besides lacking a modern social conscience, it was overall okay. Which is preferable, in fact, because I'm much better at being critical than praiseful. It did somehow pass the Bechdel test, if that's important to anyone. However, it failed the Baxendale test, which is disappointing. But until I see more episodes, I'll withhold further judgment. However, if I get bored of this show, I'll drop it like a bedpan full of hot soup and do a podcast about. Well, thanks for listening. If you found this enjoyable, leave a review somewhere. And if you have comments or more likely complaints, you can send those to my begrudgingly made email address, SFTWTHMY@hotmail.com. Despite not having a clue what I'm doing, I've enjoyed writing these episodes, so I'm going to keep doing it. And if you don't like it, well, not like you can stop me. Please keep listening to my podcast. Anyway, that's it. I made it through with enough time to get back to my house. Aw, dang it. Well, folks, wish me luck. Okay, I love you, bye. Not you, Cooter. Next week on She's Fixin' to Write This Here Murder, y'all.
Coast Guard's picking up distress signals from some damn fools out there in the yard.
I mean, maybe murder peculiar.
On your wrist is the imprint where a watch used to be.
I didn't steal it.
We need action fast.
I'm not holding any inquest till we find that body.
That just leaves Grace to get rid of.
What are you saying?
Nothing you or anybody else can do is going to change that.
Your father's body washed up on shore early this morning.
He can't be dead. To tell you the truth, I don't think there's a one of us that's sorry to see him dead.